Hey, this is Parker from Route4Me. Steve, are you there?
Hi, yeah, Parker. Thank
Hey.
you for meeting with me. I have a question. My drivers are having issues with gridlock areas in the downtown area. They can't maneuver their vans in those conditions, and I'm really looking for some help with that and to see what Route for Me can do for my business.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to help. Why don't I just run you through some of the features that you could use to really help prevent that. I could probably just plan a route and show you. Would that help?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I can see it there.
All right, great. All right, let me just jump in. I'm just at the route4me.com homepage. I'm already logged in, so normally this would be a little login page here. Yeah, so I'll just jump in. You can see I don't have any routes actually planned right now, otherwise they'd show up here. So let's just jump in and plan a route. So I go over here to the menu bar and go to the routes list, or I'm sorry, go click on Plan New Route, or of course I can click the big orange button that says Plan New Route as well. I'll just upload a file real quick and go through everything. So I can name the route. I can show this showing turn restrictions to Steve. And I can schedule the route for any date. Of course, I can do any of that. I can share the route via email or assign a route to anyone. I'm going to use drive time optimization in this case, and I'll probably just do a single driver route in this one just to keep it simple. We'll do in route at departure address or round trip, and uh, we do have avoidance zones which are possible, so I can actually create avoidance zones if I want. So for example, I'll go ahead and open this in a new tab, and it will show us a map screen. So for example, if I just zoom in here to the New York area, and let's say for example I want to avoid the tunnel. So for whatever reason I say, hey, I want to avoid this area. I'm just going to draw a new avoidance zone and call this the tunnel. We'll add it and say, okay, let's go ahead and avoid this area. So now we have a new avoidance zone. So I can change that.
Wow.
Sorry, was there a question?
Oh no, I was just saying, wow, that's great. That would definitely be very helpful.
Yeah, great. That's one way to kind of help. So, for whatever it is, if you say, okay, I'm in this area, wherever your area is, you probably know it very well, and say, hey, stay out of that. If you want to stay out of the East Village, you can draw an avoidance zone. Obviously, if you have a stop in there, it will go into the stop. So, um, yeah, so that's one way to do it in terms of avoidance zones, and there would just be a checkbox here once they've been created. So you could just say, okay, avoid the tunnel this day, or avoid East Village, wherever you set up your avoidance zones. In terms of directions, we can navigate by time. We can also navigate with current time with traffic or via distance. I highly recommend time in this case. And then probably what might really help are turn restrictions. So for example, you can actually permit or avoid left-hand turns for where you're at. That's probably going to be very helpful. You can also do U-turn restriction as well, so we can avoid those or allow them. Now, to kind of explain that a little bit, we can't avoid every single left-hand turn because it's kind of impossible, or we can't avoid every scenario, but it's basically going to reduce them significantly. So you will occasionally see one, but the system tries its best to avoid them at all costs when you have this enabled. So I'll go ahead and set this on to avoid left turns, and we'll just plan a route. So any
Cool.
questions so far?
Nope.
Okay. Let's click Create Route, proceed to add addresses. I'm just going to grab a file and drop it into here. It sees it displays. These are all in the New York and Brooklyn, New York area. We've got some other data as well. So it's going to go ahead and geocode these for us. So it found all 16 addresses. You can see that there's quite a few addresses in the Brooklyn area and then Manhattan area. which is obviously one of the very congested areas. So let's go ahead and finish. And now Route4Me is going to provide us with the optimal sequence. And it's going to make sure that we are avoiding the turns. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit easier to see. I'll show you that in a moment. But yeah, it's planned the route for us in just a few seconds. 16 stops. It doesn't, doesn't have any issue with it. So basically we're going from 1 to 2 up to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then out to Brooklyn. So you can actually see if we zoom in, for example, let's go to number 1 here, or let's go to number 2, and let's zoom in. Now, of course, you can't always, always do right-hand turns, but you can see in this case, it came around, it followed the rules, and took a right on East 16th Street, and it took another right, and it took another right to arrive at this particular location, number 2, which is East 15th Street, and then takes another right to head back uptown and go that way. So it's basically avoiding left-hand turns, and you can see that it's nicely optimized. Now you can also see, for example, there's a lot that Route4Me will do to take into account the best route for time. So for example, if we overlay that traffic, what I'm going to do actually first is take off these driving lines, so it will just show straight lines sort of as the crow flies. This is not how the optimization is done unless you choose that kind of optimization. However, it's easier to see the traffic I'm about to show you. So you can kind of see the traffic here. If we zoom in, we can actually see even finer detail of the traffic. This stop previously was taking right-hand turns, and it actually had us going on Houston Street, which actually looks pretty green in comparison to 2nd, 3rd, 4th Streets, or this general area right in here, and I can kind of highlight that for you. So for example, it actually took us down Houston and avoided kind of all of this area in here. And I'll turn back on the actual settings here. Let me grab the pointer here, and I will turn back on the actual driving lines, and you can see, yeah, it did actually send us this way. You can actually see one of those use cases in this example. It did turn left here because it made sense to turn left here. So we can't always avoid them, but we want to permit left turns when it does make sense, and it makes sense in a congested area like this to take Houston Street versus taking around all right-hand turns, to finally get on to Houston Street. So, yeah, any questions around that, or does that make sense, Stephen? Do you think that would help? Or?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I definitely could see some key points there for how that could help my business. Definitely.
Great. Yeah, a lot of questions we get typically are around, what if I need to make a change? You can absolutely make a change, and at any time. So for example, let's go to stop number 2, which I showed you earlier. If I just click on it, it takes me right there. Let's zoom in. I'll go ahead and turn the traffic off so it doesn't confuse us. You can see all of the information with it. But let's say, for example, I happen to know that location. I know it very well. Maybe I want to switch over to satellite mode. Map mode might be a little bit easier. But I can say, hey, it's actually, over here that you actually need to go. So let's go ahead and add this address add this address or this exact location. So we can do either. So if we add this address, it's going to grab the nearest address, or I can say, hey, add this exact location. And either at the last stop, I can put it at the last stop and then drag and drop if I'd like, or I can add this exact location at the optimal position. So let's just go ahead and do that. It's going to make a lot of changes here, and you can see that it's actually made that change. So what I'd want to do is just then go into number 2 and say, hey, let's go ahead and delete number 2. Go ahead and cancel it, whatever it is, and confirm. And the system goes to work, and you can see that's number 2 now. So it's made a very simple change to make those changes. Does that make sense in terms of making sure you're avoiding the congestion? You can also kind of, if you'd like, if you really know the area, you can create waypoints. So for example, let's turn on the traffic again. You say, hey, this traffic's pretty bad coming into here. Maybe for whatever reason, in order to get to number 2, I always know that, hey, 3rd Ave is always busy, is really rough. Let's make a waypoint and actually make them go to 2nd Ave. So let's go ahead and add this address or this exact location, and we'll do it at the optimal position. And in this case, it'll just show up. If we need to change that, we can. So you can see it's going from 4 then to 2, but I would actually like them to go to 4 first. So I'm going to drag that above the 2 over here on the left and say, okay, number 4. So now it goes in the sequence that I'd like them to go, number 2, then 3, and I can create that waypoint. I can even name the waypoint if I want, and just call it waypoint to avoid traffic. Not all of our customers do this, but it's definitely a tool that you can use and use a system and quickly kind of create the routes that you'd like. So, all right, so any questions, Stephen, at all?
No, I think you covered it. Like I said, my main concern was just those gridlock areas and being able to maneuver it, and with left-hand turns and avoidance zones, I think that really kind of locks down the issues that I was having to kind of resolve those for me.
Yeah, great. I mean, you could also, it might help too, as you're planning, I'll just throw one in here real quick. This is our interactive map editor, so if I just type in New York, it will actually zoom in for us. We'll zoom in a little bit further. So apparently that's New York is right near the Tweed Courthouse. Okay, so you can actually even grab on the map. So for example, I'm going to right click here, add the nearest valid address, or add this exact location. If I need to say change that, oh, that wasn't exactly correct, let me go grab that, sorry, and say, oh, it actually needs to be over here. Are you sure you want to move this? I say okay, and it actually moves it. So I can add exact locations again, or add the nearest valid address. So in this case, it didn't give that exact location. A lot of different ways to do that, and then plan the route in just a few seconds. So yeah, does that help? Anything else, or any questions?
Nope, I think that should do it, Parker. I really appreciate the help. This was very informative.
Great. If you have any questions, reach out to our support at any time. We're always happy to help. Little question mark button up here. Click support, and you can give us a call. You can email us. You can live chat, submit a case, or you can even find an answer on our knowledge base. And we're happy to help.